Okay, so we're gonna get started. First of all, thank you everybody for attending our latest episode, our latest Knowledge Burst episode. We're so happy you could join us today. We have a really exciting session today. We're going to talk a little bit about collaborative research and really how blockchain in general is really changing the whole face and nature of collaborative research. Previously, we talked about what the future of healthcare and data clouds look like, data security, trusted data and LifeGraphs, what LifeGraph networks are all about, and what it all means for AI and machine learning. And all those are really important. And to me, they all really set the stage for how all this convergence now is really changing the nature of a lot of applications and a lot of business processes. So today we're going to talk again, as I said earlier, a bit about how LifeGraphs are being applied for collaborative research. Amber Hartley, our Chief Strategy Officer, is going to lead us in that discussion. And we have just an amazing guest to join us for a fireside chat, which is Dr. Gergely Zahoránszky from the National Center for Advancing Translational Science, or NCATs, within the National Institute of Health. So truly excited about Gergely joining us today and offering my advanced thank you for being here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amber to get us down into the meat of the session today.
Thanks, Frank. And thank you everyone for joining. We're really excited about this conversation that we're going to have. So we really appreciate you being here. So I wanted to start it off by talking about, as you know, you've learned from all of these webinar Knowledge Burst series that we've been doing, that BurstIQ really connects data for business, for health, for life. That all starts, we can advance one, that all starts with smart data and how we really build smart data into these connected profiles that we call Lifegraphs. So Lifegraphs are really a new way of representing, you can click, all of the information about a person, a place, or a thing, both across data that you own and data that you don't own, but that you need because it adds context and richness to that Lifegraph and helps you get a deeper understanding of these people, places, and things that you interact with and need to work with. So Lifegraphs really connect with each other across this simple set of APIs, and that's really what creates Lifegraph Network. Lifegraph Network lets you work with distributed data more easily and apply intelligence on top of this distributed data so that you can create these deeper experiences and engagements. So things like optimization, process automation, personalization of all of these engagements, both with patients and with people and consumers. All of that is the result of being able to create more meaningful connections in data and leverage that connected data more easily. So if you want to learn more about that, as Frank said, we've done a number of knowledge bursts in terms of Lifegraph and Lifegraph networks and how you leverage that and what actually all of that means. So please feel free to go to our YouTube channel. There's lots of previous webinars and clips from those webinars so you can learn more about that. What we're going to really talk about today is Lifegraph networks are being applied in a number of different solution areas across a number of different use cases. We're going to have a webinar series talking about each of these areas, but for today, we're going to focus on one in particular, and that is how we use data exchange networks for collaborative research. So I want to sort of pause for a second and talk a little bit about kind of what's going on with collaborative research. So collaborative research is really becoming the norm in terms of how research gets done. Researchers are really increasingly focusing on these big societal problems like health and climate change and clean energy that really require you to collaborate across multiple different fields. These collaborative projects and interdisciplinary research are getting much more attention from funders. There are a number of specific collaborative research and interdisciplinary research funding programs that are popping up. And we're seeing this in the data on the other side as well. So In 2016, 65% of publications had co-authors from multiple different institutions. We've seen a tripling in the last 15 years of collaborations, international collaborations. So it's really kind of setting the standard for collaborative research really being the de facto of how research gets done. The challenge is that these interdisciplinary research programs really require large-scale data sharing and large-scale computational analysis. That's really hard to do at large scale. And it's hard to do for a couple of different reasons. The first one is that all of those collaborators in a collaborative research program have to be able to maintain ownership and control of the data that they contribute, both because it's their data and they want to maintain control over it because it's a valuable asset, but also because you have to have traceability for the inventorship. Who actually created this piece of information that's being contributed into this collective research program? How do you maintain that IP? How do you own that IP? How do you control it, even as you're contributing it to the broader program? That all is under the umbrella of how do you manage that data sharing with IP ownership and control under this umbrella of how do you also manage governance and all the policies and rules and regulations, both around organizational level, how am I allowed to share data, but also at an individual level, how do I maintain compliance with things like dynamic consent? All of those are things that researchers have to figure out how to accomplish when they're doing these large-scale collaborative research programs. And that's really fundamentally what BurstIQ solves for. So our goal is to really give researchers the tools so that you can confidently collaborate and tackle these large, complex, data-heavy research questions without worrying about losing control of your data. And that's really where our collaboration with NCATs and Gergely's team comes in. So we started working with Gergely and his team about a year ago to solve some of these really core problems. So Dr. Gergely Zahoránszky is the informatics lead of the chemistry automation program called ASPIRE at the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, which is NCATS, a division of the NIH. So Gergely's research focuses on chemistry automation and the design and synthesis of new bioreactive molecules. Before coming to NCATS, he was the development engineer at Sanofi and a synthesis leader chemist at AMRI Inc. He has a PhD in biomedical sciences from the University of New Mexico School of Medicine, where he is also, or was also in 2011, a Fulbright Scholar. So Gergely, thank you so much for being here. Really thrilled to have you. And I would love to just kind of start the conversation by maybe answering some basic questions for folks on the phone who may not be super familiar. So what does NCATS do? What is sort of the primary role of NCATS?
Thank you so much, Amber. And also, first of all, I'd like to welcome everybody and thank you for the opportunity to talk about the research and collaboration also with BurstIQ here. And also, I have a legal obligation to tell I'm a contractor at NCATS. It's very important to emphasize. And yes, so generally, what is that we do? In the name of the center is translational. So that is our focus. And I think that is built on the observation that somehow connecting all the science that's coming from academia or even enterprise, that sometimes doesn't translate to new drugs. And so this is, I would quote maybe our former director, Dr. Chris Austin, and here the former in the title is just very recent development. But his motto was really this 3D, is really develop, demonstrate, and disseminate. And so that is what we are after, developing technologies, demonstrating, and then disseminating, making sure that people are actually using that. And in this quest also, we are building bridges. So we are building bridges between academia and enterprise and potentially government agencies. And we want to make sure that whatever happens at the basic level of science, that translates to the applied science. So from bench side to bedside in clinical research. And in our center, I can truly attest, we have excellent colleagues who have these interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary background that's really needed to do that sort of research. And also they have the type of personality that they are willing to get out of their comfort zone. Another thing that we really focus on is that when we engage into projects, we do it for the science, but not solely only for the science. We actually take a look at that. How can this research result that we hope for that comes out of the research will directly impact healthcare and life sciences? So that's I think that's how I would summarize the translational aspect of our center and the main idea of what we're doing. And from my personal perspective, I also, as you mentioned, and thank you so much for the kind introduction, by the way, and I have a background in academia and also in industry. So to me, NCATs is the perfect in-between place with the perfect balance of having the scientific freedom of flexibility, but also the obligations to do science. So I think it's a great place to be at.
Yeah, no, and it sounds like from what you're saying about NCAT's role and really the mission of NCATs, collaborative research is truly foundational to what you guys do. I mean, it is really embedded in the mission of the organization, it sounds like.
Absolutely, and so if I want to maybe make an analogy, like how you can maybe calibrate the importance of the collaboration in the translational research. So I was a kid in the 80s, so I like to make analogies to space, maybe at the risk of overusing it. But to me, it's like doing that translational research is like operating like a spaceship. And if you think about the number of theoretical organic or drug-like molecules has been estimated to be on the magnitude of 10 to the 60. It's truly an astronomical number and might be even beyond that. And I at least I think of it as getting close to the number of atoms that are estimated to be in the universe. So that is our search space. So you can imagine what skills it requires to build a spaceship, navigate a spaceship, but then or operate the spaceship, but then also figure out where to go and how you get there. So that in this endeavor, in the collaboration, you need to have the right blend of talent, background, skill set, and assets to the collaboration to actually make this endeavor successful. And when you have this right combination, I'd like to think of it that flipping the hyperdrive on. So basically in this search, you are moving way faster, and that is where the collaboration truly shines. And to give you a more specific example, so for example, in drug discovery, often a biologist will figure out that in certain disease, some proteins are, I call them like misbehaving. So then maybe a cheminformatician will design using different computer-aided techniques to design a molecule that can sort of fix this misbehavior of the proteins. And then maybe even the cheminformatician can even design the synthesis route. But then you need a chemist who then can actually turn it into a protocol and execute it in a lab, or hopefully soon in the Aspire lab in an automated platform. But then maybe the chemistry realize that, oh, by the way, I need a catalyst that we don't have, and maybe it doesn't exist. And that's where maybe you find a vendor who will then provide it. So you build the bridges, connect the players, and then something truly great comes out of that. And just, or maybe another, technology like with BurstIQ, maybe that's what you need to get the wheels into the motion. So that is, I think, the true power of the collaboration.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And really bringing together all of those different expertise to really kind of solve this multidimensional problem of how do you identify a compound? How do you understand more about the context of that compound or how it operates within an in situ environment? And then what are the applications of that, and how do you apply that to medicine, to a specific industry? All of that, to your point, really requires multiple different disciplines all kind of coordinating with each other. So that to me, is really fascinating. And I've always sort of seen that this is going to be the future of research. Is that your sense as well? Are you seeing in terms of trending of where both academic research and commercial research are going? Are you kind of seeing that in the trends of collaborative research becoming more pervasive?
No, I completely agree with that statement. If you take a look at, for example, publications, you will recognize that many few, if at all cases, you have a few authors on the papers. Typically, if it comes from a translational center like us, then you will have many authors, easily sometimes the tens or maybe 20 authors. So Alone, we couldn't do really great things, breakthroughs, given the complexity of the landscape. You truly need that diverse background of the scientists to put together their mind, and also, as I mentioned, also players from the industry, because sometimes we can build really good prototypes in academia or at this level of research, but to make them really usable, that's sometimes where the enterprise can really shine and help with that. And that sometimes that is the key, because you can have a great idea if it's never put to the practice at a quality that people are willing to use. And that's also the key. So, and also if you take a look at maybe the Nobel Prize winners, very rarely you see that a single person will win these prizes these days. So that already also tells you something.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah. So I'm curious, what are some of the barriers that you guys saw that initially sort of prompted NCATs to build Aspire and to start looking at how do we make collaborative research more accessible and easier to accomplish? What are those barriers that you guys really identified?
Yes, so I think that the collaboration didn't only just start with Aspire truly. So NCATs was always, I think, operating with that mindset, and luckily we have a lot of great success stories coming out of collaborative efforts. But basically the barrier is, in my opinion, is that we need to put more information available out there, because I think more people are familiar with the more traditional type of funding opportunities. So let's say NIH has a grant like opportunity, so you apply for the grant, and if you win, you get the funding. Now, oftentimes, I hope that maybe some of you were present at the Aspire Day, but my colleague Sam Michael gave an excellent presentation of what different type of collaborations we offer or are out there that we can utilize based on what is the need. And again, we are also aware that some collaborative partners are coming from the industry. But oftentimes, the way we collaborate is that we don't give out money, so to speak. But rather what we do, like everybody brings to the table their talent, their assets, and really giving our time and commitment. And that's how actually really fascinating things are born. And that's where we want to showcase these success stories. So if people understand and know, first of all, how to initiate this process, like how to reach us. Sometimes we initiate it, but we can also be approached. And we actually making effort. We're building an Aspire website where we want to make this very clear to the visitor, like how do you initiate this process? If you have a great idea, reach out to us. We find a way so that we can talk about it and come up with a research plan. So once, I think we need to educate the field a little bit more so people understand. And then once they understand the mechanism, then another barrier is that it revolves around trust, and that has many aspects. For example, how are we assuring the proper and secure segmentation of the data? Make sure there's no data leak from one collaboration to the other. Also, how do we securely exchange information? If we need to bring on board, and sometimes it happens, there's a good need for that, a third party, then how do we share data on a truly consensus basis that everybody really agrees to that? And then this process should be, and maybe it seems like a conflict, but transparent but secure at the same time. And I think this is where blockchain really shines, because it's not visible only those, but for those who have the permission, they can actually see that whole process. And I think anything, and again, like a blockchain is a means of promoting and facilitating that collaborative research. So I think, and really building the trust, another aspect, how do we do it? Again, demonstrating that we have success stories, and we demonstrate with our collaborating partners that we treat everything confidentially, properly. And if they're happy, we did a good job. And then hopefully the word goes around, and that's how you build up the trust.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And that's actually a perfect sort of segue to what I was going to ask you next, which is, can you talk a little bit about the collaboration with BurstIQ and how things started and how the partnership really got started, and kind of how you guys have been using the BurstIQ technology to solve some of those problems that you just talked about?
Yes, thank you so much. So great question. So the way it started, in Aspire, the first thing we wanted to do to utilize our knowledge base. Here we have this working term is the Electronic Laboratory Notebook, or ELN for short. And this is where chemists enter the information regarding reactions. So clearly we wanted to mine this data, create a knowledge base out of that. And then we wanted to utilize it for designing synthesis routes. So we build algorithms on top of this data so that then figure out for target molecules what are the hypothetical routes or steps that you can find in our database, so that if you do those A, B, C, then you end up in D. And but this is where we started a discussion with the chemist, and actually somebody asked the question that why should I allow other chemists to look into my data? And maybe surprising, but it's a fair point. So all this discussion led to other discussion, like, okay, how do we solve this problem? So we need to have a technology that, first of all, has a very efficient access control and data segmentation, and does it in a secure way. And so this is where we were, that the blockchain came to our attention. So, the lead of Aspire, Alex Godfrey, he pointed out that we should look into the blockchain technology. And my colleague, Dimitri Metaxatos, found your company. And then basically we started the discussion to see, like, how we could potentially utilize. And of course, as always, starts with an introductory meeting. And then after we actually create the proper confidential channel for this in-depth discussion, which we did, then the next step is that we figure out the research plan. And basically that's where we realized that so we were working on an architecture, and we figured out building the architecture is led by myself. And then we figured out that how we can adopt this technology on this architecture and also make changes so that it's actually like a really nice synergy. So at the end of the day, it is even better than as we designed before. And basically that's what happened when we applied the blockchain. We solved all the issues that we were facing in a very efficient manner. And I would say that even something extra came out of it that at the time when we were looking for this solution, we didn't even think about it, is exactly the consensus-based data sharing. Mm-hmm. It's like, how can we share data again with the third party that everybody who is already under the collaboration truly consents to it in a technical level and in a transparent way. So when we added all this together, and then we worked on together with again, I would say a huge thanks to the fantastic BurstIQ team. And that was really, the key to develop the communication and always, because we needed to understand the technology. I can talk about myself. I knew nothing about blockchain. So I really learned all the things from you guys. And then we saw how we can basically implement into our solution, which at the end of the day led to the novel technology that we developed together with the BurstIQ.
Yeah, no, and I think that's really in line with how BurstIQ sees data management and data ownership, and how you permission data for different purposes and really control how that data is used and combined with other pieces. And it sounds like, and you and I have talked about this before, that when we think about Lifegraphs and we think about what it means to create a Lifegraph and the intelligence that you can apply on top of that, you guys are really applying that in the context of new novel chemical compounds and how they embed within a chemical reaction process or a series of processes, and then how that even is contextualized within broader contexts. There may be molecular contexts, sort of biological process context. All of that kind of comes together and sort of builds into a Lifegraph that has this chemical compound or chemical process as its core, and it really has all of these sort of layers of context around it that are being applied by various different ways of looking at the data, or various different facets of that data. And that's sort of fundamentally what Lifegraph does from an intelligence perspective. And then applying all of that within this context of who owns what pieces of that puzzle, and how do they want other collaborators to see their piece, and how is their piece allowed to be used, and for what, and under what context, and what are the rules for that. All of that sort of fits really well into kind of how BurstIQ operates. So that's so I love that, because it's kind of perfect for how we think about the intelligence and context around data. So I know that this was an early pilot. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of what's next for you guys. What are you looking at doing next? Where are you going to go? What's phase 2?
Yeah, so phase two, if you remember what I mentioned, the 3D, like develop, demonstrate, and disseminate. So I think the next, if I need to answer one word, is dissemination. So we need to find those who had the same open challenges that we were facing, and we suspect that we are not alone. What we had challenge can easily be present at NIH, other centers, or even in pharma. So we need to find those who have the same challenge, and we would be happy to have them adopt the technology, because I think this is a great solution. We also doing some other like testing, performance testing, so we can even provide them all that data so that can help them to make informed decisions. Now, we also want to, as you mentioned, also explore what other options are there in the BurstIQ platform that we didn't even utilize at the moment. One thing that clearly in the Aspire integrated computational platform that are leading the development of, we will explore how we can fully integrate into that platform this technology, and also to look beyond. Like as you mentioned, we are also doing a lot of biological screening. We also have data science projects, so we want to explore, and also, as you mentioned, this is a live graph concept. That the nice thing about graphs that you can really add additional layer of information, very flexible, very adaptable. So we can, I think, easily extend that and see how we can utilize them in those projects. So I think at this phase, really want to explore all that, but I think I would think that there's a good need for this technology, and if we do that, as I said, that can really help to promote all the collaborations, because I truly think that's one of the barriers, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. So that kind of, I mean, that sort of lays the foundation. Like, what does that future look like? As you're thinking about the impacts of this to collaborative research on kind of a broader basis, like what does that 5-year vision look like? It's going to solve some really core problems, but where does that take us in terms of what we can accomplish in research in general?
Yes, so I think, first of all, the impact, this can be truly transformative. And because I think that the technology we develop together can act like a catalyst. And as I said, reducing the barrier, and that really shouldn't be underestimated, that factor. So what I would hope that this will really catalyze all this collaborative research, and not only at the NCATs level, as I mentioned. However, it will truly catalyze also other collaboration intramularly or extramularly. But also, I think the same thing can happen between academic groups and enterprise, pharma industry, and other government agencies. So all across the globe and the map, if you think about it. And because at that, I can tell you that we didn't have a good solution for that. If we had, we wouldn't have started the collaboration on this. So this was truly an unsolved problem. And I think with our technology, we really have a promising solution. And people, and we need to, as I said, disseminate this technology, make sure that people now know about these solutions, which we do. We had a chance to talk about this technology at the recent 2 workshops. So, but this is where you make the connections, and this is where I think nice things start to happen, because as I mentioned at the beginning, when you build the bridges between academia, clinical researchers, industry, then this is where you're flipping the hyperdrive on. And this is where we can really move a much faster pace in this research. And unfortunately, there's very many conditions and diseases today for which no treatment exists. So the idea is that we will find them at a much faster rate. Because again, if I want to make an analogy to maybe space, and sometimes people ask the question, those who contemplate that, we are not alone in the universe, like, where are the others? So I can make a translation to that, like, where are the drugs? So we're putting all this money and effort, and if you take a look at the number of drugs that every year they are approved, it's not that impressive number. I think people were expecting to see a much higher number of new drugs and basically a higher rate of conquering diseases. So that's the expectation, that building the bridges, turning the hyperdrive on, we can get to finding new treatments at a truly much more faster way. And this is also where technologies like the Aspire platform will play a very important role, because you also need to do a lot of things like in an automated manner, so that we unload routine tasks of scientists like chemists, and we let them think about like truly like novel and revolutionary solutions that maybe they don't have the focus and time because they need to synthesize things manually at these days. And also, if you think about the COVID situation, like having an autonomous platform is potentially the last stronghold, the last line of defense, because if you take a look at what happened, the field started to look into solutions based on approved drugs. So that's what we call drug repositioning. So try to find already approved drugs that can work against some pathogen. But what if that doesn't work? Then you need to go and find original new molecules, but then you need to synthesize them. But what if you cannot go to the laboratory? So that's where autonomous chemistry platform also will play a very important role in the future and also accelerating all this process.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. And I'm going to open it up to Frank. I don't know if we have any questions from the audience or if Frank has any questions, but I just wanted to follow on as Frank's coming on to what you said, that really the ability to accelerate the pace of research, in addition to actually bringing down the cost and the time to market for all of these drugs and treatments that are really beneficial, the other thing that it does for the industry is allows the industry to be much more adaptable, so that, to your point, when the next pandemic hits, because we know it will happen statistically, we're more prepared, and we can not just react more quickly, but also get ahead of it and actually know that it's coming and be able to mitigate a lot of the really detrimental effects that we've seen this time around. So I think, to your point, accelerating research just has so many benefits, both in terms of the cost of treatments and the cost of healthcare in general, but also our ability as an industry and even as a society to just be much more adaptable and be able to react and be able to get ahead of what we're seeing happening in terms of health and health trends and changes and all of that. So it's really fundamental to how we succeed in the future of health. So Frank, I will pass it back to you if you have.
Thanks. I got two questions, one for each of you real quick. So I'm gonna start with Amber, because I'm gonna give Gergely the last word. So, Amber, talk a little bit about how this kind of framework impacts monetization and really IP ownership and rewards in terms of contribution.
Oh man, you're tapping into my legal nerd side. So, one of the interests, this is sort of, my background. The ability to manage inventorship and be able to have provability to inventorship and be able to maintain control over assets, the impact of that financially is enormous. And the impact to be able to transform data, not just into, the analytical capabilities, but the monetization capabilities of being able to physically and functionally own that asset and be able to do things and extract value from that asset is incredibly important. I mean, really the traditional way of that academic institutions manage intellectual property and manage the monetization of that property is really around, we have a set of patents or patents going through a system or a set of provisional applications, and we're going to try to license those out. It's a relatively slow process. It tends to not be particularly adaptable, and you can create this much more adaptable system where the data itself, the data asset itself, becomes the core value. And there's lots of patents and lots of intellectual property that wraps around that, but it becomes a much more adaptable and monetizable asset. It becomes this whole new stream of how you actually manage the value and the ownership of those data assets that are being created, both by academic researchers and by commercial researchers, and how they value those and how they monetize those just completely changes when you change how you actually manage ownership and control of that asset. So it really is a game changer in terms of valuation and managing that value.
Well, that's awesome. Okay, last word. I have two-part question, because we see this whole push towards the edge, both on the network and intelligence and smarts and capabilities. Describe what's been emerging from a research perspective to allow smaller participants or these innovators now to enter in this notion of collaborative research. And then second, do it from the perspective of how you see the potential impact of artificial intelligence or machine learning accelerating some of these developments as well.
Yes, thank you. So I think that what comes out of the collaboration is that really, as I mentioned at the beginning, when you put together the talents you bring to the table, and then sometimes, yes, maybe there's no funds like being exchanged from, let's say, from NCATs, but we also offer, other capabilities like screening, and that you can translate it as maybe saving costs to your organizations. And maybe somebody has a great idea, but they couldn't do it alone, or the other way around. So I've seen many examples of that where truly nice things came out of that sort of research. And I know also part of collaborations where maybe a small academic group was collaborating with us, and then we found a very nice research result. And I don't want to go into details because, again, I want to make sure that we are protecting all the confidentiality of those collaborations. And regarding the machine learning, I think that will play a very important role. I also want to address that we shouldn't forget the human, the experts behind it, because you still need the scientists and engineers who will make the technology work and invent those technologies, constantly improving, because they will be playing a really good role in scaling up, doing things that chemists cannot do in the magnitudes of millions of reactions, of searching this enormous search space. That's where they will shine, and also graph technology. Some also people, focused on machine learning and deep learning. In my view, the network analysis and the graph theory is just part of that. Also part of that artificial intelligence. So these innovative solutions like the LifeGraph, a graph databases, that technologies, I think will play a revolutionary role moving forward.
Well, I think we're about, that's an awesome last word, and I'm going to agree with you. It's about collaborative intelligence and enhancing what we could do as people. So I think that was awesome. And one last thing, we thought that the outcome of our collaboration was so powerful. We collectively decided to begin pursuing a joint patent around some of the unique innovations that materialized during the collaboration. And a lot of that has to do with the team at NIH and NCATs and really pushing the bubble in terms of how we use our platform. So Dr. Zahoránszky, I can't thank you enough, one, for being on the webinar and sharing your wisdom and experience, but just the collaboration we've had over the last few months has been an absolute blast. It's been really fun and really amazing to see what comes out on the other end. Even exceeded our wildest expectations, I can tell you that. And Amber, as always, thanks for your insight and moderating the conversation. So with that, I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the day, and see you on our next Knowledge Burst.